Members, it's time for us to start our meeting, and we've also formed a quorum. I now call this regular meeting to order. According to the agenda, item 1 is confirmation of minutes, is paper 378. Minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of December has already been distributed to you. The Secretariat has not received any proposal for amendment. So if there's no comment, I'll invite members to have the minutes confirmed. All right? Confirmed. Item 2 on the agenda, information papers issued since the last meeting. Since the last meeting, one paper has been issued, which has already been set out on the agenda. Next, items for discussion. At the next meeting, that is the 11th of March, that will be after the Chinese New Year. Well, I'm a bit unhappy because just before the meeting at 3 p.m., the administration proposed an additional item. The Secretariat was actually pursuing that, but were only informed at 3 p.m. I will allow them to add this item to the next agenda. It's about counseling services for the students. The administration would like to introduce to students the comprehensive counseling services and their development, as well as the latest improvement. I believe the briefing won't take too long. So if there's no objection, I'll allow the administration to add this item to the agenda. That is to introduce the counseling services for primary students. After the last meeting, together with the Deputy Chairman, Mr. Ip Kin Yun, we had a discussion. Well, in fact, today we should be discussing the decline in the number of secondary students. Mr. Kim Yun and I reviewed the agenda and saw that we had a long agenda. We are to discuss electronic textbooks, shortfall in primary school places, etc. So we may just have 10 to 20 minutes to discuss the drop in the number of secondary school students. So if members so agree, we'll discuss that on the 11th of March. Well, I believe we'll have more time then, because according to the arrangement, we won't have too many items for the 11th of March, all right? And recently I received 2 letters, one from Dr. Kenneth CHAN and another one from Mr. Ip Kin Yun. I believe you've all got the 2 letters. I think recently we're very concerned about educational sites. Recently we discovered that many sites originally scheduled for educational purposes are to be converted to residential uses. Well, I don't know what reasons the government will be putting forth. But recently we heard that in Ngau Tau Kok, a site earmarked for a secondary school would be used for residential blocks. And in recent days, you've heard from the news that for the the former Li Wai Li Institute, the vacated campus is to be converted to residential uses for the construction of luxury flats. So after receiving the letters from Mr. Ip Kin Yun and Mr. Kenneth CHAN, it's necessary for us to discuss government's policy on these educational sites. So first of all, educational sites. Second, drop in secondary school students. And then number 3, counseling services for primary students. I think we should have time for all these items. So if there's no objection, we'll have these 3 items at the next meeting. Then we'll proceed to the discussion items. Please raise your hands. We would like to add something. Claudia? Oh, you would like to add another item to the agenda for the 11th of March? We already have 3 items. Well, Mr. Chairman, I wrote a letter to you on joint enrollment by the universities. It should be the 17th originally, but is to be advanced to the 15th. I was really shocked. There's a reply from the government. Yes, but the reply from the government was shocking. School principals and teachers said that they did announce that the date would be advanced to the 15th of July for joint enrollment. So for French, German, and the ethnic minority languages, they should take their examinations in November, December. That means they're half a term short. I asked the Education Bureau, I won't name names, but the person privately told me that announcements had been made. But number one, there's not yet been any decision. Secondly, examination arrangements should be made in accordance with students' interests. Well, point taken. Ms. Claudia Mo, I've received your letter. Yes, the Education Bureau was late. We just received the letter. Yes, we're very shocked. Yes, the Secretariat did raise this with me. Well, pass this to the Deputy Chairman and me. We'll try to put it on the agenda for the 11th of March as far as possible. We have 2 hours, but of course we can extend that. Well, the Deputy Chairman and I will serve as gatekeepers. I'm very shocked. It's now the tradition of the government to tell lies. Well, I cannot answer that on behalf of the government. Point taken. Kenneth CHAN, for matters arising, there are a number of items. I'd like to thank you for passing my letter on Savannah Institute to members. Well, they now want to call itself university. Maybe in future they will call it a government university. Well, I think we should do something about this. We should follow up on this. As for self-financed programs, you'll recall that at the last meeting, Dr. Fernando Zhang and I moved a motion which was carried to ask the Bureau to discuss with the sponsors of the self-financed institutions to see how they should be regulated, and reports should be submitted to us. So, Chairman, I'd like to follow up on that. And of course, national education should be followed up as well. It has sparked an incident, and more are coming. I think the administration should come to explain to us, and this panel is duty-bound to follow up on the issue. Well, for the Savannah issue, in a moment, if we still have time, I'll ask the Secretary to provide a brief reply. As for self-financed institutions, we discussed that many times. In November, we had a public hearing, and on the 14th, the motion moved by you and Dr. Fernando Zhang was carried. All right, I'll follow up this with the Bureau. I don't think we can discuss national education on the 11th of March. Ms. Claudia Mo, sorry, Chairman, I'd like to interrupt again. Well, this is related. The Savannah story was reported in magazines. Is it that in the name of education, they're privatizing a monument? Well, Ms. Mo, I'd like to start the regular meeting as early as possible. We have quite many agenda items. Under any other business, if you don't have any item under AOB, I'll ask the Bureau Director to respond, all right? So if there are no special comments, I'll proceed to the discussion items. First, progress of implementing the e-textbook market development scheme. In accordance with Rule 83A of the Rules of Procedure, if any member has any direct or indirect pecuniary interest in this item, if any member would like to speak, he or she should disclose that interest. Mr. can you brief us on the paper? It's paper 380/01. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members. Today, on this issue, I'd like to provide a brief but comprehensive reply. To make full use of IT to promote teaching and learning is what we should do in facing a knowledge-based economy. That's a global trend. In this regard, the administration is committed to the promotion of IT education. And since 1998-99, there were 3 strategies in this regard. So I'll briefly recap the salient points. First of all, we would like to move from textbook-based and teacher-based models of teaching to interactive student-based learning model. The first 5-year plan was launched in 1998. At that time, the emphasis was to advance with time and to make full use of IT for learning. The pretext is to assist schools to have IT equipment and promote the use of Internet as well as professional development on the part of teachers. And digital learning resources should be developed and the IT culture should be promoted in schools. The next phase is in 2004. We should make full use of IT and open up a new education era. The emphasis was to enhance students' quality in the use of IT, to enhance teachers' capacity, and to promote IT methodology in teaching. And leadership should also be promoted. The third 5-year plan started in 2007. Then the emphasis was on timely use of IT, and actual school circumstances and scenarios were looked into in formulating educational plans, and IT was integrated into teaching and learning. In that process, through a one-off subsidy, we provided technical support to schools, and parents' participation also started. In 2010, we started a pioneering project. In that year, we allocated funds, $59 million, for an e-learning pilot scheme. After 3 years of implementation, we thought that we should put experiments into real action. That means we should not be confined to papers and framework. 63 schools and special schools participated. They studied 21 development projects as well as research projects to explore under different school scenarios how e-learning could be promoted to take care of learning discrepancies among students and to encourage lifelong learning among students.
In December 2011, we set up Learning and Teaching Resources Review Task Force. It made a number of recommendations saying that e-learning should move away from the traditional textbook into a comprehensive and independent e-learning textbooks. So they would become an alternative to printed textbooks. Following the task force advice, we created a commitment of $15 million to provide a seeding grant to approved applications from non-profit-making organizations. We will follow the local curriculum to come up with e-textbooks for different subjects, and we will also set up a quality assurance mechanism so that we can create a comprehensive set of e-textbooks and also the recommended textbook list for e-textbooks. So we have a number of vetting procedures, and we have a steering committee on the selection, quality assurance, and review of EMATs. to oversee the implementation of the scheme. In November 2012, among 86 applications received, 30 applications have been approved, covering major subjects such as mathematics, English and Chinese, general studies, computer literacy, history, geography, Chinese history, life and society, and PE. 21 were for primary schools, the remaining for secondary schools. Comparing the prices of these textbooks, the e-textbooks are on the cheaper side, and the difference is up to 60%. The successful NPM applicants and other applicants have to sign an agreement with the government, which requires them to commit to sales prices for 4 years and 2 years respectively. Concerning this marketing procedure, we have received very positive response, and we feel that we are following the right track. More importantly, we're able to attract more people who are dedicated to creation of e-textbooks to join the market and provide more quality alternatives at reasonable prices. In this process, we have not only contacted e-textbook creators, we have also engaged 89 partner schools to do field tests of the e-textbooks by 3 phases. And we can provide feedback to the developers and refer to previous experiences. We can come up with better vetting procedures. Hong Kong Education City also created this middleware as a platform to connect the learning management system and the resource system, so the students and teachers can rely on standardized accounts and passwords to make use of the educational resources. Finally, I would like to highlight the development of e-textbooks is not unique in Hong Kong. Actually, if you look around the world, such development is very rapid. In many countries, including South Korea and Singapore, they have already developed their own e-textbooks in an open manner. We need to ask a question. Compared to the rest of the world, where does Hong Kong stand? We realize that according to PISA 2011 report, 98% of local students have more than one computer connected to the internet, which is ranking very top in Asian countries. And it is much higher than the world average of 88.7%. In the same survey, Hong Kong students rank number 5 concerning the use of e-textbooks. So we already have a solid foundation to take this further. And we expect that from the partner school scheme and all the publishers and developers involved in the scheme, we can gather more experience in the use of e-textbooks to promote e-learning and come up with the details of the next stage of this initiative. Thank you. Who would like to speak? Please raise your hand. I'll read out your name. Mok Nai Kwong, Chan Ka-lok, Vice Chair, Ma Fong Kwok, Chuan Kwok-chu, Wang Bik-wan, Fernando Zheng, Claudia Mo. 8. Anyone else? If not, Q&A 3 minutes per person. Mr. Mok. Thank you, Chairman. Secretary, not long ago we have met to talk about e-learning. I support the administration in terms of its direction to further develop e-learning. I've told you about some problems in relation to resources of the schools. Let's not talk about that. Today, let's talk about e-maths. In this scheme, I can see some e-textbook publishers have said that under the scheme, you seem to focus on non-profit making organizations. There are other organizations as applicants as well, but you always highlight the non-profit making organizations. What is the reason? And what about small to medium e-textbook developers? Because there is money coming from the government, and non-profit making organizations such as universities have a lot more resources. Now funding is being provided, and after quality assurance, they will be placed on the recommended textbook list for e-textbooks. Some companies have said that for small to medium-sized e-textbook developers, they feel that according to previous experience, it's very difficult to get endorsement. And with this scheme, there's even more competition. In the past, there were some cases where some schools were already using e-textbooks, but they could not be endorsed. So perhaps you should remove the vetting procedures for the e-textbooks. Any response from the Secretary? I will ask Dr. CHAN to respond. Thank you for the question. This is a seeding grant scheme for those who participate and get approval. There are mainly profit-making organizations, and the quality assurance mechanism applies to all of them. When the scheme is completed in 2014, they will enter the market, which is a level playing ground. So there is no inclination towards non-profit making organizations. So what about the vetting procedures? How do you ensure? Maybe for whatever reason, some publishers are not able to participate in the scheme. Is it going to affect them being included in the recommended textbook list? Afterwards, any e-textbook supplier can present their work for vetting, so there is no ban on newcomers. Well, e-learning is the new global trend. If the government does not promote this, we'll be lagging behind. Nearby places, we're talking about 1 billion, 2 billion, 3 billion being injected. We are only running this pilot scheme, so we are responding very slowly. Many people complain that the textbooks become more and more expensive, and the government wants to stimulate the market with e-textbooks. But it seems that you have made it sound very big. But now, people are quite disappointed. 89 partner schools, but each school would only get a maximum of 16 tablet computers. 16 tablets. Is that enough? How are they going to use them? And for the vetting procedure, there is a pilot scheme, there will be some guidelines. What is the content of the guideline? Can you provide the content to this panel or the public so we can discuss the content? Secretary? Thank you for the questions. 16 tablets, is that enough? We're not talking about every student having one tablet. We promote group learning, and most students already have computers at home. So we actually focus on learning outside of the school. As for the vetting procedures, we ask for the same quality of printed textbooks. But on top of that, we have some requirements about e-functions or e-features so that they are more effective in promoting learning. That is the general criteria. We have 2 external panelists to join the vetting procedure to ensure that this is fair. You're not giving a clear response to the second question. You've talked about the direction. I don't want to argue about that because I don't know about the content. So when it comes to teaching and learning, from the perspective of students and teachers, they want to know about the vetting criteria. We're talking about development, not one-off activity. So I want to know about the content of the mechanism. Anything to add? Perhaps I can offer more details. Concerning the mechanism, we will talk about the quality of the textbooks, and they will have 12 months. Once the guidelines are issued, they can produce the textbooks to us for vetting and assessment. All the criteria are listed online. When the time is right for e-textbook, there will be a new assessment guideline, because we have to rely on the partner schools, and then when the time is right in 2014, any publisher or organization that wants to provide their textbooks for vetting, they can do so freely. I welcome that, and I also want you to provide some follow-up papers. Vice Chair, 3 questions. First of all, in the scheme, we focus on enhancing quality. But for the e-textbooks that I have come across, and this experience is quite limited, I am not sure that there are too many options that would help learning and teaching. Do you have any cases in which you can show us that that is the direction you are following? In para 13, you mentioned the prices, and the largest difference is 60%. So e-textbooks can be up to 60% cheaper. How can you save the cost? Because the cost of paper is one major difference, but what about development cost? Comparing printed and e-textbooks, it should be the same, or even for e-textbooks, it should be higher. Together with the hardware, the difference should be even bigger. So I want to understand more about the price difference. Under the current scheme, how can you save 60%? Third question, other than e-textbooks, more importantly, we need to focus on e-learning. The whole concept is not just about textbooks. Do you have a bigger scheme about e-learning, Secretary? Perhaps I will take the third question and leave the other two to Dr. Chan. In the process of learning, I can give you 2 examples. Electronics is not just about textbooks. What about PDF file and interactive features inside the software? The textbook will provide a very different impact. Last week I went to a school for a visit. They use technologies like micro movies to learn about general studies, and the outcome is very good. So this is self-guided learning, and that is very much encouraged. I do have some other examples to support this claim. And youngsters are focusing more on e-learning these days. Second question about prices.
For prices, before we launched the scheme, we commissioned a consultancy to study prices. They discovered that on the average, e-textbooks only cost us 80% the costs of printed textbooks. Well, we can save in terms of storage charges, and then some professionals are already experienced in this regard. Well, there are discrepancies in the amount of savings. Sometimes it can be as much as 60%. The most important thing is quality. Mr. Ma Fung Kwok, Mr. Chairman, I also represent the publishing sector. Many publishers complain to me saying that there are a lot of implementation problems. And concerning the vetting mechanism, they consider that there's a lack of transparency and the publishers cannot master the criteria. And then it seems that the government is subsidizing certain operators in their businesses, which is unfair. In the long run, how will the government pursue quality assurance? Thirdly, about prices, according to the government survey, e-textbooks will be much cheaper. But then in the pilot scheme, 8 prices quoted were actually higher than printed textbooks. Why is it that even with a subsidy, e-textbooks could be even more expensive than printed textbooks? Deputy Secretary, well, our vetting mechanism is not perfect yet for e-textbooks because we don't yet have a comprehensive set of e-textbooks for P1 to P6 students. So we hope that in 1.5 years' time we'll be able to produce a perfect series of e-textbooks for P1 to S3 students. After 2014, we'll have a vetting mechanism that is totally similar to that for printed textbooks at the moment. The vetting system is transparent. All the vetting criteria can be perused by the publishers. As for sustainability, e-textbooks can be sold in the market and prices promised have to be adhered to, and the intellectual property right belongs to the developer. So mainly they can rely on intellectual property rights for sustainability. But will it be unfair if you subsidize certain producers? Will you ask the non-profit making bodies to undertake that they will not pocket the profits? Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Ma. Well, all along they have to be non-profit making. They have to submit their accounts to us. Well, but still, these non-profit making organizations are competitors. Well, we would like to be able to start in 2014. That is to have a complete and professional e-textbook market. At present, we don't yet have e-textbooks for each and every subject. So we'd like to speed up the process. Dr. Chan Kwok-chi, Ms. Helena Wong, and Claudia Mo. Mr. Chan Kwok-chi? Mr. Chairman, just now, the Secretary mentioned textbooks as well as films. Well, I support e-textbooks. So textbooks may not be the only product. Secretary, concerning e-learning, what is your ultimate target or objective or vision? Because I have to know your ultimate goal and ultimate vision before I can comment on the scheme. And how many years will it take for us to attain that vision or goal? For provision of platform, teacher, training, etc. You have to consider equipment and facilities. At least you have to provide them with tablet computers. And what about the poor students who don't have tablet computers? So for e-textbooks, you must have a whole basket of inter-supportive measures. Behind these e-textbooks, we're talking about billions of dollars. Just like Dr. Kenneth CHAN said, we might be lagging behind other jurisdictions. So what's the ultimate vision for the government? Well, I'll try to say a few words first, and then Dr. Chan can supplement. We said just now that e-learning and e-textbooks are just tools. So the pretext is that they must be helpful for teaching and learning. Microcomputers can be used, electronic devices can be used, but the ultimate goal is to assist teaching and learning. if you look at the advanced jurisdictions, you see that computers can be carried around anywhere, anytime. Learning can take place. You can find this in other jurisdictions. As for the second part of the question, I defer to Dr. Chan. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chan. Yes, we have to advance with time, and we have to match the latest IT advancement. Hong Kong is an international city. We must maintain our competitiveness. Whether or not technology can assist teaching and learning depends on the effort of teachers and students, such that appropriate technology can be used at appropriate times. Well, Mr. Chairman, when I'm asking about vision, we have to know the future. Teacher training is very important. What do universities have to teach? It depends on the ultimate objective of the government. Otherwise, you will never be able to catch up. Dr. Helena Wong. Well, Dr. Kenneth Chan's question is very good. What about the specific criteria for passing those 30 products? What do you mean by content? What's your emphasis? Interaction, student-based, secondary school-based, or what? If you don't have vetting criteria, I don't know in future who will come forward to apply. And have you analyzed the existing market conditions? For example, those who have applied and succeeded, those who have not applied, those who have applied but failed, those who have never applied, etc., etc. What difficulties did they have? And what's the role of the Education Bureau? And Mr. Chung Kwok Chi also asked a very good question. What's our vision in future? We don't want low-end education. If you produce very poor e-textbooks, our students may end up with very poor eyesight. And if you think that e-learning will definitely be cheaper than teaching by printed textbooks, you're wrong. Look at Singapore and Taiwan. In Taiwan, they invested a great deal of money in this. Yes, we should develop this free market and encourage the production of e-learning materials. But then the government has to inject funds into this before the scheme can bear fruit. In Taiwan, they dumped a great deal of money in it. They have a research institute with many, many professors and postdoctoral researchers, and they are very humble. They just try out with mathematics and Chinese. I visited their schools, which were very good. If the administration thinks that half subsidy with just 30 successful applicants would be very successful, it would be very wrong. So we must know the vision. Secretary, what's your vision? Well, I agree with members that e-learning is not equivalent to e-textbooks. E-textbooks is just a form of learning. An e-textbook is not equivalent to a PDF file. For example, in a certain school, during e-learning, the mothers also took part. The mothers also took part in the e-learning process. And ultimately, by e-learning, we mean that at any time, at any place, students can learn. Deputy Secretary, would you please clarify the vision? Well, number one, we'd like to have rich e-learning resources, be it a platform or other open resources. Secondly, we hope that on this platform, students can learn on their own. Thirdly, we would like to form a learning group together with students and the academia. Dr. Fernando Zhang. Mr. Chairman, when the government first launched e-textbooks, apparently it would like to balance the market such that the publishers won't continuously increase the prices of textbooks. However, the e-textbook market has developed very, very slowly, and we don't see any concrete timetable. Can you tell us, say, by a particular year, all textbooks will have an electronic form? So you would like to know whether there's a timetable? Yes. And now with internet subsidy, as well as a support scheme for internet access, in particular for the latter, family participation has been very low. For the disadvantaged families, if they don't get sufficient support, there will be another digital divide. So in those respects, does the administration have any concrete views to benefit more families? Deputy Secretary, I'd like to thank Mr. Chang for his question. We're developing the e-textbook market, and through the Education City, we try to provide a platform of educational resources. For any particular theme, teachers may not necessarily use printed textbooks. They can have other educational resources. So we're developing, well, I dare not call it an examination script database, but it will be an assessment base to assist in teaching and learning. Now we have this textbook subsidy for CSSA students, and 47% of students are given this subsidy. How can you enhance the usage rate? I mean, for the support scheme for internet access. Secretary, well, we've discussed this within the administration. Dr. Chang, you're very correct. We need to provide more direct information. When we visited the schools, most of them were unable to produce records. So for the fourth five-year plan, we must master better the use of the devices. So we'll go back and improve our data collection system. Well, you must give room to teachers and students. Well, you see, they are exhausted at the moment. Sometimes they have to teach and learn. Sometimes they have to access the internet. Last one, Ms. Claudia Mo. Mr. Chairman, e-learning is, of course, not equivalent to e-textbooks. For social subjects, for daily living subjects, in particular for public affairs and liberal studies, it may not be possible to produce textbooks. You can't catch up with the development of incidents. And I'd like to know the degree of autonomy accorded to teachers. The Secretary mentioned some examples. For example, these days we have an explosion of internet information. And then just today, you can get a great deal of information just about the CE. If I'm a teacher, if I want to catch up very closely with current affairs, what can I do? Can you assure me that teachers have absolute autonomy in teaching?
Thank you for the question. It is very important. In terms of e-learning, we focus on self-directed learning for students, and also in the framework of the curriculum, the teaching methods and timetables will be compiled by the teachers and the schools. We do not want to have something fixed for everyone. For example, we will fix some Chinese poems for learning, but the rest will be handed over to our professional teachers. A follow-up. Secretary, do you undertake today that in the future, in the local education system, e-learning will not in any way carry out political screening or censorship, because our chief executive has been returned due to his connections with the gangsters. Because it is politically incorrect, it will not be included in the curriculum, and if it is taught in schools, will the schools get any letters from solicitors? Well, in the current overall framework and on the level of school management, we're talking about school-based management. So I do not see how we will do any scanning or censorship. There will not be any political censorship. Thank you. That's the end for this item. Let's move on to the next one, which is a heated topic. Shortfall in primary school places in North District and the related issues. Please brief us on the paper, Secretary. Before that, actually, I want to see how many people would like to ask questions. Regina, you're not raising your hand? Thank you for the concern. Before the briefing, I will read out the names. Fernando Chang, Kenneth Chan, Wang Pek Wan, Claudia Mo, Ma Fong Kwok, Tam Yu Chong, Mat Mei Kun, Vice Chair. Anyone else? Oh, also Priscilla Low. Anyone else? 9 members. Secretary, please do the briefing, and then I will fix the time. Thank you, Chairman. This is a topic that has attracted a lot of discussion. I will just focus on a few highlights in my briefing. The government greatly attaches importance to the impacts on primary one places in the Northern District caused by cross-boundary students. And we have launched a number of measures to deal with the situation in 2013 and beyond concerning further improvements. For short-term measures, for 2013-14 in Northern District, the shortfall will not be more than 1,400. We are going to adopt flexible measures to try our best to deal with the shortfall. There are a number of measures. First, with the remaining teaching space, there will be better use, and we can also use multi-purpose spaces to turn them into classrooms. In 4 primary schools in North District, there will be expansion work, and finally, more places for students in every class. So every year, according to our experience, there would be some students in North District who will have to travel to Tai-fai to attend school. Because of this, we are going to adopt some special measures this time because the number has surged, and this is a pressing issue. We ensure that there will be more places in North District so that more students can stay inside their own district to go to school. In June this year, when the POA results were announced, if any students in North District has already declared their residence in North District and they belong to the school network there, if they have been allocated to Tai-fai and they would like to give up the places in Tai-fai to stay inside North District, they can request for help, and we will increase more places in North District so that they can attend school at primary 1 inside North District. For the medium to long term, we are not talking about impacts just in 2013 and 14, but all the way into 2018 and 19. Therefore, we hope, while we optimize the arrangements for 2013-14, we can give priority to the wishes of the students in North District. and reduce the number of students who are forced to travel to other districts to attend schools. We would like to collaborate with other policy bureaus and departments to improve cross-boundary arrangements to better divert the students to other places. We would like to implement measures to overcome the challenges. Different parties have made a number of proposals recently for us to consider. For example, we can set up this special network for cross-boundary students. We can also provide some assistance to the students to stay in the mainland to attend school. We will continue to be open-minded to collect reviews and work on different recommendations to identify the best option and measures which are legal and reasonable, giving higher priority to the wishes of local students. This is a very detailed paper. I'm not going to repeat the content. Now we welcome your thoughts and questions. Thank you. Fernando Sheng. Q&A, first round, 3 minutes. Thank you. In the paper, para 14, the government said that right now you have a mechanism including POA and discretionary place admission. It seems to be more important than the policy of institute school attendance, because you said that it is not practical. Schooling within district is not practical. I do not agree that this principle should be violated. The allocation system is only the tool. Schooling within district should be the biggest principle. If the allocation system cannot guarantee schooling within district, you should change it. For primary and secondary schools, you should allow schooling within district. This is a necessity. This must be a policy. You should not say that it is not possible under the allocation system. I think you are placing the cart before the horse. Secondly, the condition in North District. According to the POA, people would only be notified in June whether places inside their own district are available. This is very late. Students and parents have to make a lot of arrangements. Schools have to hire teachers, and they may have to modify the facilities. It takes time to hire teachers. They need to have time to prepare. They need to make some changes at the administration level. Can you do it sooner instead of waiting until June? Be practical. Do not be limited by the allocation systems or admission systems. I will ask Jessie Wong to respond. Maybe we can explain the admission mechanisms. We promote schooling within district to bring convenience to parents. There are 3 options for parents to choose. According to statistics, when they choose their own preferences, these preferred schools may not be inside the original network. We allow this option exactly because of such demand. In the paper, we would like to explain that in practical operation, what we allow parents to choose. If they can go beyond their own school network, sometimes they would choose their own districts, while some parents would choose to go beyond their own district. So this is an option for the parents. What we're trying to say is that schooling within district policy should not apply to all the parents in all 18 districts. Can I respond to the second question? Why do we have to wait until June? This is again about parents' options. North District parents have already chosen their preferences, and they have chosen schools in Tai-fai, which is inside the North School Network, North District School Network. When we announce the results in June, parents will have the choice. If they like the school in Tai-fai, they can maintain their option, or they would like to return to North District, they can come to us and we'll find a place in North District. Mr. Kenneth CHAN, the secretary said he's going to be open-minded. So open-minded that perhaps they can run some education organization in the mainland with the Hong Kong style. You have met with some members and the content has been disclosed by the press. Can you talk more about this cross-boundary concept? You seem to think that it is mature enough to be implemented. Do you expect any problems? I see that you're only tackling the symptoms. We're talking about the primary school places. You said it is going to continue until 2018, but is it going away after 2018? Actually, they will be promoted to secondary level. Sometimes we keep pushing the secretary. We want to know about your vision and direction. Secretary. Thank you. There are two major points here. When it comes to the overall design, we have started this committee involving different departments. We are not going to wait until June. We have already started studying into this matter so that we can come up with a breakthrough in handling the impacts to come in the following years. Secondly, when we met with the press, some reporters said that there are some suggestions, and what do you think about the suggestions? As I've said, there are good suggestions coming out recently. For example, we can choose a location to set up a new web network, or if we examine the capacity in different districts, compile a list for parents to choose. But for cross-boundary students' parents, they just want more information so that they can make informed choices. Right now, they are doing it blindly. So perhaps we can better inform them as a network so that they can make better choices. Thirdly, can we run a school with local style in the mainland? Or some classrooms can be used? Can we accommodate both primary and secondary school students in the same campus? All these are great suggestions. We will continue to collect them and study them. I'm not saying that this is the mature time for implementation. Okay, I can narrow it down because you have broadened it. As you know, cross-boundary networks. Many schools are worried. Are you going to reserve some spaces? Second round, please. Next one, pick one. Thank you. There's a lack of school places in North District, and this paper is about increasing number of places. How is that going to be done? In every class, are you going to add more students? Is it possible that the small class teaching will turn into medium-sized or large-sized or large class teaching, sacrificing quality of education? Second question. These students are very young, and we agree that if parents would like to have within district schooling, we have to protect them first. We have many cross-boundary students, more than 20 to 30%. Should we set up a new network? I think that direction is worth looking into. But can you offer more details about the concept? Are you going to include all the students outside of Hong Kong? Will the government make any adjustments, including considering setting up a dedicated task force to, in an orderly manner, arrange these students into North District schools?
Then these schools won't be too crowded. So you have to arrange school buses, pre-register those students who are coming to Hong Kong to go to school. So will you give us an undertaking that you set up a cross-boundary net? Jessie? In 2013-14, how are we going to increase the number of places in North District? We're concerned that some North District parents may want to go back to North District even after the students are their children are assigned to places in Tai-fai. So I think the first choice here is to increase the number of classes. And we did liaise with the school principals. We'll see whether there are residual classrooms or special rooms that can be used for classrooms. And 4 schools are undergoing expansion. Well, after increasing the number of classes, if there's still not enough places, then we can increase the class size. But still, we can have small class teaching, which is only a mode of teaching. So schools can still teach in the form of small groups. So we'll try as far as possible not to affect education quality. That's for 2013-14. Now, what about the enhancement arrangements for years after 2015? Members asked whether we'll set up a special school net for cross-boundary students. That's one option, which was suggested by some school principals and counselors. But we have to study that proposal very carefully. Like what counselors said, we cannot casually allocate students to this cross-boundary net. So we'll discuss with other government departments, including the Transport Department, to see how transport services can be provided to cross-boundary students. Ms. Claudia Mo, Mr. Chairman, I always have this perplexity. It's already international news that students are crossing the boundary every day to go to school. This is actually laughable and against human rights, and school children may easily suffer from this shadow. Well, because these are so-called type 2 babies, these cross-boundary students do not live in Hong Kong. So is it that we have a fundamental problem? You may say that it's now too late, but did you actually make a mistake back then? Please give us an answer. Now, for those cross-boundary students whose parents live in Shenzhen, you said that special schools for children with Hong Kong parents would be set up. It doesn't matter. You can set up schools to benefit them. All right, but those schools are for Hong Kong parents and their children. What about these students whose parents are not Hong Kong residents? Their parents live in Shenzhen. The children are handed over to nannies. Well, some may be living in North District, being taken care of by nannies or relatives. How are you going to differentiate among different types of Hong Kong people's children? Well, Michelle can supplement in a moment, but I'll give you the fundamental principles. Now, schools for Hong Kong people's children is not a new concept. We have several of them now. They have Hong Kong curricula, and half of the teachers are Hong Kong people. Oh, sorry, Chairman. Then that's precisely my question. Then the name of those schools is not correct. Well, I think the secretary was not providing a straightforward name for those schools. Well, Ms. Mo asked whether we made mistakes because we did not envisage those problems. Well, we did observe that cross-boundary students are growing in number. Originally, there should be surplus school places in North District, and that's the biggest problem in society. Recently, Shenzhen changed its policies. Chairman, will they draw a line in the secondary school stage? Can you prohibit these students from entering secondary schools in Hong Kong? Well, we'll study all sorts of possibilities. I'll put on record Ms. Mo's suggestion to see whether that's feasible and how it should be handled. Mr. Ma Fong Kok. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For long-term planning, can the administration consider doing something in Shenzhen, maybe near the boundary, schools should be opened there. Then parents and students don't need to waste their money and time. A number of years ago, I visited a school in Shenzhen. I can't remember the name. Is the Hong Kong NPC deputies visiting that school, which took care of Hong Kong school children. Did the SARG consider a similar mode of operation? And the Shenzhen municipal government was very willing to help in terms of land supply and so forth. Of course, these children's parents would like their children to receive education under the Hong Kong education system and the Hong Kong mode of education. That's why they're sending their children over to Hong Kong. So why don't we set up schools in Shenzhen? The government has to allocate resources for this purpose anyway. So why don't you invest in Shenzhen schools? Then the original POA system in Hong Kong won't be affected. I did ask the then Secretary for Education to do something, but a few years have passed. Nothing came forth. Michelle? I'd like to thank members for their questions. Concerning this suggestion of setting up schools in Shenzhen for Hong Kong people's children, it's not a suggestion, it's implemented already. Yes, it's been implemented for a few years. Now we have 2 of them in Shenzhen, and 4 other schools run classes for Hong Kong people's children. Hong Kong residents' children can enter these schools. We've signed an agreement with those schools. Exchanges are numerous between the 2 sides in terms of sharing of teaching materials and sharing of teachers' experience. As for allocation of secondary places, those students who complete P6 in Shenzhen can come back to Hong Kong for secondary education. Can you clarify the figure you just mentioned? 100 or 800? 100. Well, the most important issue is, do you subsidize them? At present, these schools run the program on a self-financing basis. And now there are suggestions that subsidized school places in Hong Kong should be allowed to be used in Shenzhen, but the implications are far-reaching. If Hong Kong's public money is to be used on the mainland, what will happen? And what about regulation and quality assurance? Because Hong Kong's internal laws cannot be applied on the mainland. And those parents sending their children to Hong Kong to attend school have their own aspirations. On the mainland, if we implement a comprehensive Hong Kong curricula, what will happen? So we have to examine all the details. Next, Mr. Tam Yu Chung. Well, if Hong Kong resources are to be channeled to the mainland, it will be a major issue. We have to study that very carefully. When it comes to implementation, there are bound to be a great deal of controversy. But of course, for the children, it's good. They don't have to travel to and from the mainland. And this time, why do we get so many cross-boundary students? Is because Shenzhen has changed its policy. These children no longer can go to school in Shenzhen. Well, in fact, that policy change took place a few months ago. Is it that the SARG did not pay attention to that piece of news? Or is it that the SARG has underestimated the impact of that policy change and is caught by surprise? And after learning the news, what expeditious solutions did you have? It's just a few days ago that the Secretary for Education assured the media that those parents who would like their children to go back to North District for schooling could approach the Bureau for assistance even after their children are given places in Tai-fai. And some parents actually complained for the lateness of this news. So I think you should learn a lesson from this. And what about information dissemination? How can you provide more information to parents? According to media reports in Hong Kong, some school principals of Hong Kong also went over to Shenzhen to launch seminars, etc., to collect views from the parents. Can you do this more frequently? That is, before parents make a choice, they can get more information. Otherwise, they'll opt for the simplest choice, that is, to choose a school in North District. They may not mind the quality of the school chosen. They'll choose the nearest school to save, say, transport expenses. For example, in Yuen Long, you do have places. I think Hong Kong's schools have assisted many cross-boundary students in recent years, and as a result, schools in North District didn't have to reduce the number of classes. Ms. Alice Mack, well, this is not a new issue. Even 10 years ago, a retired school principal went back to Guangzhou to set up a school, but failed because no subsidy was provided by the government. Nobody would like to send their children to such an expensive school. At that time, that school principal also adopted the model of Hong Kong in Shenzhen. So that was done 10 years ago, but in vain. So if you revive this idea now, it's just like distant water. It cannot extinguish a near fire. And on behalf of the FTU, in a moment, we'll present you with a stool. When we were in kindergarten, we played this game of competing for stools. Well, I've never thought that even for primary school places, we have to play this game again. Now, you said that if these cross-boundaries, you said that if some local students are allocated places in Tai-fai, if their parents want them to go back to North District, they can approach your bureau for assistance. But then when they opt for North District schools, you may not be able to give them a place in the school they prefer. So my worry is that your suggestion may not be able to solve the problem. You're just giving an empty undertaking. Secretary, there are 2 points. Number one, we're serious. Given the statistics of the past few years, we should be able to do that. The fourth strategy can be handled. But of course, members were very correct. We should have learned a lesson from this incident. And we'll also examine what can be done in the medium and long term. Now, we're confident that we can solve the problem immediately, but we're worried about the years to come. Number two, information is very important. We understand that timing is important.
We want to provide more information. Why do we notify them in June? Because they need to learn about the outcome and how we can make arrangements. Do you have the figures? How many people will come to you? We are still working on it. Every applicant will have 3 options. We will analyze their 3 preferences, and that was only concluded 2 weeks ago. We're following up actively. 4 left for first round. Vice Chair, Liang Meifan, Wang Yukman, Leung Guohong. Second round, 2 members, Fernando Cheung, Kenneth CHAN. So no more for first round, right? So 2 members for second round. Vice Chair, 2 questions first. There's this rumor going around today that things will not be resolved in North District. They will now consider half-day schooling. Secretary, can you elaborate on this point or clarify? Is that the plan? Secondly, we talked about the 4 measures. One of them is more students added to a class. How many to be added? What is the estimate? Can you give me the figure now? A related question. The Secretary just said that there will be resources given to the schools to support them. What would be included in the package? I suggest teaching resources, admin resources. Everything will be covered. Can you talk about your initial thoughts? Secretary, Jessie? Concerning half-day schooling, when we met with the primary school heads, some of them suggested this option. When we talked about future measures, some principals said, let's be creative. For cross-boundary students, perhaps half-day schooling is going to be more better received. Let's give this to the parents as an option, but this is just one suggestion. How many students to be added to each class, we cannot tell you today. We need to see if certain schools have the space for additional places. How many classrooms can be used for additional students? And then we will know how many students will have to be added to each class. About resources, we've been meeting with the school principals and they have mentioned different requirements. Some of them want to be flexible. They want some grants given to them so that they can hire new teachers or assistants or to cater to admin needs. Perhaps they need some help with minor works as well. We're talking to them on all fronts. So you are thinking about half-day schooling. That is quite shocking. I think school principals may be trying to help in coming up with this idea. We have to consider one important thing. This is regression and more regression in education. We're going back to the 70s, 60s, or even 50s when we begin to run schools on rooftops again. Again, this is not our suggestion and we have not decided to do it. It's just a suggestion from some of the schools. Thank you. Next, Liang Meifan. Thank you, Chairman. A few years ago, well, actually many years ago, when we talked about closing down schools, we already told you in a number of years there will be a shortfall because we cannot predict the population change. And now we see that what we warned of you is turning into reality. This is a pressing matter. This is education. Let's think about the future. Do not just focus on the short term because students are always the victims. We will have to cross a river by touching the stones. Their lives will be affected. So first of all, back then, when we decided on the secondary school and primary school admission systems, we wanted to have schooling within district. What is the original intention? What was the original intention? To allow students to travel short distances. And now we're talking about students coming from Shenzhen. They're definitely coming from far, far away. That is very far from our original intent, right? That's the first point. Secondly, I'm more concerned about quality of teachers. Now that we do not need to close down any more schools. If you open new classes, what about learning culture? And perhaps we need to place the bias aside. The students are legally entitled to have education in Hong Kong. I do not want to see any of these students not having a place in secondary school. They were born in Hong Kong. They have not done anything wrong. It's not their fault. What about quality of teachers to tackle cultural differences? These teachers will have to be specially trained to handle conflicts. We're talking about students coming from a different background, bringing something new to the classroom, but if they are not handled properly, there will be negative impacts. Because of the closure of some schools, some quality teachers have been wasted. Can we deploy them here? Fourthly, when we talk about this topic, about a Hong Kong-style school in the mainland, I have visited one, and it is very successful. Please give higher preference to this, because they prefer Hong Kong-style education, because they are permanent residents of Hong Kong. They are qualified to attend a Hong Kong-style school in the mainland. I have seen success cases. We can also deploy local teachers to those schools. No time left. Next, Wang Yukman. According to the paper, the shortfall is no more than 1,400. According to Fernando Cheung's letter, only 800 places available in the net. So the discrepancy is huge, as we can all see. In Para 2, 23,000 Type 2 babies were born. So this problem will continue for 6 years. Whatever you do to tackle the problem now or for the shorter term, they fail to really resolve the problem. You are alleviating part of the problem, but it is not fair to some other people. What about the local students? Local students who have parents who are local residents. They are being victimized. Type 2 babies and the baby formula problem have turned into real headaches. You have to stop such conflicts and segregation. So Type 2 babies will have to cross the boundary to go to school, and the local students will be affected, and this problem will continue on for years. What about secondary schools? We have reduced the size of the classes, and are we to expand the size again in a number of years? Perhaps this is not your fault. The previous Secretary for Education was responsible, and then the Donald Tsang, who was responsible for population policy, should be shot in the head. But everything is related. These measures will not truly uproot the problems. You were so happy to kill so many schools back then. But today we expect more concerning our hardware. What about village schools? Should we re-establish them? Shouldn't we build new schools? This is not the way. You have to come up with new schools. The schools who were closed down, perhaps they fail to match modern needs. They don't have the facilities. So basically you need to build new schools. So what about the secondary schools? So you've killed so many primary schools, and you need more people for secondary schools, and then the Type 2 babies, when they grow up and they have to attend secondary schools. So today when we talk about this topic, we should not resolve short-term problems or phenomena. We need to come up with a long-term plan. Okay. Next, Mr. Dr Hon, Chairman. Of course, education policies. Since the handover, they have been changing all the time. The government is truly short-sighted. They will look at opportunity cost. If there aren't so many people attending school, let's kill the schools. They do not realize that improvements can be made and they can be used as a backup plan. And now they have come up with some temporary measures. So, Secretary, I would like to ask you, in order to handle the shortfall in North District, do you have a plan? Do you have a plan to identify the space? I think that is the core of this issue. Have you thought about finding some new schools in North District? Secretary, have you? Concerning long-term planning, I totally agree with you. Back to this point, for medium to long term, we have a number of ideas other than the 4 measures. In 2016, a primary school will be established. It is now under construction. Secondly, in North District, in NT West, we still have some space that can be used. So we are thinking about diversion. So it sounds easy, but actually safety and the actual movement of the students is very important. And also school buses and coaches will have to be arranged as well. Thirdly, we don't want to be nearsighted. That was a good reminder. We will not close down any secondary schools because we have to think about the future. As for hybrid schools, if there is some available space, how can we better utilize the space? Some school heads have suggested different options to us, so I can tell you we will try our best to come up with a solution. Second round, 4 members: Fernando Chang, Kenneth Chan, Priscilla Leung, Vice Chair, and myself, 5 people. I'll draw the line there. Q&A 2 minutes. Fernando Chang, please. Thank you. Just one point. Children, especially primary school children, schooling within district is a fundamental requirement, and it is about the welfare of the children. Now, the Bureau is saying that people can choose which school they prefer. If I live in Tin Shui Wai, can I choose a famous school on the island side? Yes. Then aren't we forgetting the benefit and welfare of the child? How can you say that it is not practical to actually follow the principle of schooling within district? You should not just attach importance to the wishes of the parents. What about the welfare of the children? You are the policy maker. Shouldn't you focus first on the welfare of the children? You should not say it is not practical. I cannot accept that. Secretary? Jessie? Chairman, I think the welfare of a child, for primary school students, we want to bring convenience, so people will have to follow their own school network. We need to give the options to the parents. They can choose a school with the right culture and right teaching method for their children. They can make necessary arrangements. Perhaps on the way to work, they can drop off their children to school. So it is a principle to provide convenience. But we still want to offer options to parents. But their options are overriding the welfare of the child. I want you to turn that around. Kenneth Chan has left the room, so Priscilla Leung first. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. If they want to choose the Central and Western District, we don't want to encourage that. In the future, if they want to choose a better school with better facilities,
有 boarding 有寄宿係嘛？但係呢個
Well, of course, in future you can even consider boarding schools, but that won't be the mainstream schools. As for my questions, I'd like to say something about teachers. We want quality teachers. Will you do something to attract teachers to these districts? And then on the mainland, if you can establish quality schools for Hong Kong people's children, you should also try to attract Hong Kong teachers to teach there. I agree with you that quality of teachers is very important. So for our options, whether it is to increase the number of classes or other options, we will discuss with school principals to make sure that there are sufficient teachers. And for teaching materials, facilities and equipment, we'll also provide support. We'll provide support in the professional sense. And of course, schools have been asking how much support will be given to them if they are to take on additional students. I understand that point. Some retired teachers would also like to come out and help. That is the special quality of Hong Kong people. Well, yes, you should encourage teachers to go to the mainland to teach. Yes. Deputy Chairman, I'd like to raise 2 points. First of all, I'd like to follow up on Dr. Fernando Zheng's view about schooling in the same district as the home. Well, I respect parents' choices, but the problem now is the children are allocated school places in another district, while the parents want places in the same district. Well, you look around the world, you'll see that it's a fundamental principle that students should attend school in the same district as their home. So if parents and students don't want to go to another district, basically a school place should be offered in the same district. So I'd like to have some response in this regard. Secondly, I hope that you won't be planning for just 1 year. And when you do planning, you shouldn't work behind closed doors. The Secretary said that he did liaise and discuss with some stakeholders. Now, first of all, there must be interdepartmental discussion. Obviously, traffic and transport is important. CIQ services is very important. So, you should try to assist the North District students and all those stakeholders related to cross-boundary students should be consulted. Deputy Secretary, I'll answer the second point first. For long-term planning, after 2014-15, we'll discuss with the relevant stakeholders. We did discuss with the Security Bureau and the Transport and Housing Bureau in relation to transport arrangement, etc. As for school places within the same district, I'd like to thank the Deputy Chairman for his support. Well, in fact, we have offered Tai-fai as an alternative school net for the North District parents. So it's not true that they did not have a choice. They did have a choice, and they chose Tai-fai. Dr. Kenneth CHAN. Sorry, Chairman, just now I had to answer a telephone call. Originally, I shouldn't give you back the chance. Oh, I'm very moved. Now, I'd like to draw the government's attention to the recent social sentiments of Hong Kong. You should guard against possible conflicts between Hong Kong people and mainlanders. So in this regard, streaming may not be a desirable option. And just now when I mentioned cross-boundary school net, that's precisely what I meant. Well, you can imagine that some parents in Tai Po, North District, or even Yuen Long may be worried that they might suffer as a result. Now, you give us the impression that the pie will be enlarged. But as a result, you may get this problem of conflict between Hong Kong people and mainlanders. So don't let parents feel that their children are unable to get a particular school place in a particular district because of the cross-boundary students. Secondly, if these cross-boundary students concentrate in certain districts, a stigmatization effect may result. In London, the UK, we mentioned type 2 babies, and we're told that when the policy was to be implemented, there might be problems. I've heard the Honourable Member. Secretary, I'd like to ask a realistic and pragmatic issue. Just now the Secretary repeatedly said that in 2013-14, in order to cope with this problem of North District students being allocated school places in other districts, a whole series of measures will be put in place. School expansion, increase in the number of classes, resource increases, etc., etc. To me, these measures are just short-term measures. I believe in the long run, you won't continue with these measures. Now, for these short-term measures, I'm worried about quality, including teaching quality, teacher pressure, and learning quality on the part of students. For those of us who've been engaged in factories, if you ask workers to work overtime, quality will suffer. So I'm worried that our educational quality may also be affected. So how are you going to ease the pressure on the teachers? How are you going to reduce the impact on the students, etc., etc.? So they cannot just blindly study. Well, yes, it seems that we want to increase this and that, but the most important thing is we should not adopt a broad brush approach. We have to address demands. And class sizes do vary, 25, 27, 30, 31. So we have to plan well. Secondly, concerning quality, we ask the same question. What sort of support should we provide to make sure that teaching quality won't be affected? and school principals are taking the lead in this. Well, that's my worry. Some of our colleagues just now asked about figures. I understand that you cannot grasp the figures. So if you can't grasp the figures, how are you going to allocate resources? The teachers are not sitting there with nothing to do. If you want to increase the class size, to what extent would you like to do so? How big the class should be? If you don't have the concrete statistics, how can you assure us that quality won't suffer? Well, in fact, this phenomenon also occurred in the past few years. Schools are already experienced in this. Even for overtime calculation, I believe will be reasonable. Recently, parents called radio phone-in programs to say that they might want to stay in Tai-fai. So we're confident that number one, we'll be able to handle their wish. Secondly, education quality will be accorded the first priority. Well, your wish is the same as mine. We would like to keep quality. But from your reply just now, I can't see how you can guarantee quality in terms of schools, teachers, and students. Well, when we have more statistics, we'll be able to address the issue. So once you get the statistics, give more information to the panel. All right, so much for this item. Let's proceed to the next item. Pilot project on revised school complaints handling arrangements. The Undersecretary for Education, Mr. Kevin Young, is leading the team for this item.
Well,
Secretary, you can just leave it there. We'll present it to you.
All right, for this item is paper 380/04. Mr. Kevin Young, Undersecretary for Education. Mr. Chairman, the purpose of this pilot project is to cultivate a culture of good communication and establish a well-defined complaints management system for the purpose of good governance and quality services. Now, the details are in the paper. I won't repeat them. Now, there are 3 points of clarification. First of all, the Education Bureau is not shirking its responsibilities. It will continue to regulate schools. After deliberation, we're of the view that school complaints in relation to day-to-day governance and internal matters should be handled by the schools. For education ordinance, complaints directly related to quality of service, etc., they should be handled by the Bureau, and we should provide support to schools. If complaints involve serious matters, if there is serious malgovernance, the Bureau should intervene, and the pilot project will be monitored to make sure that schools will play their role. Thirdly, we're sure that the workload of frontline teachers won't increase. The management, the school supervisor, the school principal, the subject masters, etc., will be responsible for handling complaints. Investigation can start when necessary, so it's nothing different from the present system. On the average, we have 209 schools involved in complaints. Those involving 1 to 2 complaints, about 190 odd of them. 3 to 4 complaints, 11 schools. And the other schools are only related to no more than 6 complaints. So the number of complaints to be handled was not that many. And on the basis of a school-based approach, schools are already handling complaints, so there won't be additional work. And will provide training to those personnel who are to handle complaints. Under the revised amendments, a review panel comprising representatives from schools and non-school members will be formed to make sure that complaints can be handled fairly and to guard against repeated complaints. Then school resources can be more effectively put on teaching matters. And according to the result of the pilot scheme, the effectiveness of the scheme will consider how to take the scheme further. And members' suggestions are welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Now Q&A. We have 4 members. I'll read out the names. Fernando Cheung, Tam Yu Chong, Vice Chair Kenneth Chan. 4 members. Q&A 3 minutes each. Fernando Cheung. Thank you. Concerning this pilot scheme, we are worried that the same group of people will be investigating themselves and the responsibility will be passed on to the schools if there are complaints against the schools. First of all, of course, they can handle the complaints on their own. But in fact, not too many organizations or bodies can monitor the work of schools. LegCo cannot, nor can the Ombudsman. Only the Education Bureau has this power, and this is your responsibility. With this pilot scheme, you are handing the power elsewhere. You need new evidence before you can apply for a review at the review committee's level. So there's a lot of burden on the complainant. If it is a complaint coming from an employee of the school, this mechanism does not apply. So it seems like the Education Bureau wants to pass the bucket around. If a staff of the school is engaged in the complaint, you won't get involved. So basically you are discouraging people from complaining. And at the end, nothing will happen. I want to hear from the Education Bureau clearly. How can we ensure that this review committee will be open in handling all the aggrieved cases? Thank you, Chairman. Secretary? To be practical, perhaps let's address the staff issue. They are not under this mechanism because they are under the current mechanism. If a staff member lodges a complaint, it reaches the Bureau, we will handle it. Sometimes we'll have to go back to the school to ask for more details about the incident. But this pilot scheme is for schools to handle matters relating to daily operation. The goal is to hope to perfect their own complaint handling mechanism, to directly handle complaints, to facilitate direct communication and early resolving of the issues. The previous handling mechanism is that the Bureau will ask for information from the school and then respond to the complaint. Now, can I use a little bit more time? They can launch a complaint against the school directly. There will be a reply from the school, and at the same time, it is CC to the Bureau. So we will see the development of the matter. Right now, we will offer assistance to schools to perfect their handling mechanisms, such as better ways of handling complaints. And for those cases not handled, they have to record the reasons. As for the review committee, For example, it will reach a number of levels and people are aggrieved. Still, they come to us to complain. We will have staff to look into the matter. So the review, please be brief. The review committee will look at the rationale and the grounds for review. So please rest assured. Next, Tam Yu Chung. I want to seek clarification. How many complaints does the Bureau receive every year? How many are handled? How many complainants are still aggrieved with the handling method? Do you have the figures? I just want to get the figures. Aggrieved complainants. Do you have the numbers? I have mentioned in the past 3 years, the average per year, 209 schools, 1 to 2 complaints. Can you be clear? 209 schools had 1 to 2 complaints. Only 1 to 2? That's our statistics. Deputy Secretary, concerning the number of complaints, as Mr. Young has said, roughly 200 and odd complaints, 270 odd complaints. In this process, when intervention is necessary, sometimes it is inquiries or explanations given, and the related parties withdrew their formal complaints. So 200 odd cases, 270 complaints. Were they happy with how the complaints were handled? Do you have the figures? Mr. Young. Mrs. Wong. Our way of handling complaints is that we would handle the complaints and handle all the matters related to the complaint. The outcome will be... Well, Mr. Tam's question is, are those complainants happy? Well, sometimes we would offer explanation from our perspective. It is about whether the complaints were substantiated. So the complainants were satisfied? They do not look at that. They will look at whether the complaints were substantiated. You should have a conclusion. Satisfied or not is quite abstract. Whether the complaints were substantiated would be more concrete. I want to know about the outcome. Chairman, I would like to supplement. When we receive a complaint, we would investigate and then send a reply to the complainant. If he's not happy, he will write back or call back and we will explain further until he is happy. Then it is concluded. Maybe he's afraid of trouble. Doesn't mean he's happy. Vice Chair? Concerning the review committee, how often do they have meetings? If they have to have frequent meetings, perhaps it's too overwhelming for them. Or if they have very infrequent meetings, it means that you expect most of the complaints will have to be resolved at the school level. So I'm just thinking, is it really feasible? Can you give a response? Well, there are members to the review committee, chair, vice chair, plus 1 to 2 other members will form the panel. and they will review the cases one by one. Do you have an idea how many? Any quantified figures? This is a new measure, and we want to resolve complaints or cases that have dragged on for a long time. It's hard for us to come up with any figures. We'll have to consider the actual situation. Any timetable by the end of 2013, within 1 year. Before the review committee, your staff will not, like before, handle the complaints. But could you continue with this practice? When your staff has handled the case, if necessary, the case can go to the review committee. Otherwise, in the future, it may be very difficult for a case to be escalated to the review committee level. Chairman and vice chairman of the review committee should not be expected to have very frequent meetings either. So I'm quite concerned. Thank you. Secretary? Well, as the Deputy Secretary has said, 200 odd cases per year on average in the past 3 years. For those reaching the review committee level, well, the number may not be very big. I think it's about priority. The review committee will submit their views to the EB, and the EB will reply to the complainant. Kenneth CHAN. Thank you. This is very thin paper, only 5 pages. On page 4, there's a website of the steering committee or the pilot project. And then if you open the link, it is a 34-page long paper. I know the EB is good in writing papers, but if you are a teacher or an affected frontline staff of a school, if you claim that you're not trying to pass a responsibility elsewhere, I don't want to argue on a definition, but all of a sudden they have to handle more things. You talked about giving training so that they can handle the complaints better, have better procedures. But what about paperwork, correspondence, adjusting their attitude? This is not simple. And it gives people the impression that no matter how many layers you're adding to the mechanism, people will have the feeling inevitably that you are trying to pass on the problems to the front line. And you have this appendix, including mosquito problems, environmental problems, so on and so forth. So for the teachers or frontline staff in schools, it's very difficult. If you want to renew a hospital or the facilities, there will be many complaints. District councillors and LegCo members will have to handle many complaints. So we're talking about a lot of resources, manpower, paperwork involved. So you want to run the pilot scheme for a year, and you do not rule out the possibility that in a year's time you're going to withdraw the plan? Secretary, we run the pilot project to see if it actually achieves our intended goals. We do not rule out the possibility that we will withdraw the plan altogether. And we will hand over things that should be handled by the school to the school, such as mosquitoes and noise.
Well, it will be a delay if the complaint is to pass from one party to another first. So the spirit behind this pilot scheme is to save time. That is, the school can handle the complaint directly. In fact, this pilot scheme is welcome by the schools. Many of them actually asked for participating in the scheme. So we have to give them room for participation. Deputy Secretary, I'd like to clarify some misunderstandings concerning the revised arrangements. Even those schools that are not participating in the pilot project are also handling complaints. However, they may not have established a sound mechanism for handling complaints, and the skills of their staff may not be mature enough. So through these revised arrangements, we can allow schools to understand more. Well, there are 30-odd pages in our guidelines, but in fact, they are not too complicated. There are cultural differences among schools, for example, so we would like schools to reflect on themselves to see whether there's room for improvement. As the Undersecretary said, schools do welcome the pilot scheme. 80-odd schools participated in the pilot scheme, and actually more told us that they would like to participate. The pilot scheme has been implemented for several months. We understand that our guidelines as well as the skills suggested have been welcomed by schools. So we'll see whether there's room for improving the guidelines. As for the next step to take, that is whether or not the pilot scheme will be extended to all schools, we'll wait and see. In fact, some schools joining the pilot project would like to join our training programs. Mr. Chairman, let me clarify one point. Maybe the officials said that I was only making remarks very casually. That's not true. I also participated in seminars. 80-odd colleagues in the education sector complained to me, you cannot just inflate the part that is welcomed by schools. Sorry, I heard complaints about those parts of the pilot scheme that are not welcome. Dr. Helena Wong, well, in handling complaints, we should be fair, such that complaints are handled satisfactorily. Of course, we're worried. Normally, if a school receives a complaint about a teacher or a parent, basically the complaint will be handled by the school itself. But if the complaint is against the school principal and the complainant is a teacher, how can this internal mechanism in the school ensure that the complaint is fairly handled, even if the school principal does not sit on the complaint committee? There'll still be doubts and worries. So there must be some intermediaries. For example, the review panel that you suggest, I won't call it a review. It's not really a review. It should be a standing establishment. Well, if parents and students' complaints are resolved within the school, they won't come to you. It's only when the school cannot handle the complaint that the complaint will go to you. Maybe you should adjust your arrangement. You must have some members from teachers and teachers' representatives. Just now you told us that 209 schools received 1 to 2 complaints, etc., etc. Altogether, less than 500 complaints. If that is really true, then 500 complaints is really very few. Ask Tai-fai. In the IPCC, we have more than 500 cases every year. Can you simplify the procedures, for example? Please be brief. I'd like to reiterate that the whole system is to enhance the internal arrangement of schools in the handling of complaints. But of course, if a school cannot handle a particular complaint, we would like to have a review. Well, in between, we can do some fine-tuning. Maybe after the pilot project is completed, we can re-examine the issue. Well, we've overrun by 6 to 7 minutes. I have 2 more members on the second round list. Dr. Fernando Cheung, and then Mr. Ik Pian Yuen, the Deputy Chairman. All right, 2 minutes each, Q&A. Very simple, Chairman. 2 points. Number 1, I note from your guidelines that the appeal mechanism in the school does not comprise independent members. As it is called appeal, you must have some lay members. Don't give people the impression that they are investigating themselves. So there must be independent members from outsiders. As for review, you mention substantive evidence. All parties concerned will think that their views are justified, and you should handle new information as well. So that condition should be dropped. You have to give people the impression that apart from the complaint system, there is a review system, and eventually it won't be people investigating themselves. And the line of monitoring goes all the way to the Education Bureau. If you put in such a condition, it may be deterring people from appealing. Well, I welcome Dr. Fernando Cheung's suggestion of having an independent member in the review panel. Should we set prerequisites for the involvement of an independent member? Well, I'll go back and reconsider the issue. And then when the pilot scheme is reviewed, we can consider the appeal mechanism again. Deputy Chairman, well, just now under the pilot, it said that under the pilot project, 80 schools were participating. In recent years, we only had 209 schools receiving complaints. What about the 80-odd schools? Do they belong to the 209 schools? Any overlapping? If these schools have never handled complaints, no wonder their record is very good, because they've never got the experience of handling complaints. Secondly, the Bureau explained that the whole exercise is to enhance the internal mechanism of schools in handling complaints. If that's true, then we should first of all enhance the internal mechanism within schools. Before the appeal mechanism matures, why should you cut off the Education Bureau from the line of monitoring? Under Secretary, well, it's not a matter of cutting off the Education Bureau. All along, we've been helping them, even for the 80-odd schools. We've been helping them throughout the whole process, this monitoring. And we're also given copies of the complaints. We just want to draw the line clearer. That is, in terms of system, we would like to clarify who's responsible for what. It's not that we're doing this too hastily. We want schools to master the skill earlier. Deputy Secretary, as I explained, the focus of this proposal is not to change the existing procedures. We want schools to enhance their systems and receive training. In the past few months, when we try to enhance the school system, we observed that schools progressed very well. Coupled with the training provided by us, the feedback from schools has been very positive. As to the question of whether these schools have actually handled complaints, we haven't got the figures. Schools told us that after participating in the scheme, the culture of handling complaints had been enhanced. Can you elaborate on the complaint data? Yes, give us the figures after the meeting. All right, so much for this item. Next item on the agenda, any other business? It's time for us to finish. Let me go back to Kenneth Chan's question about the Savannah Institute. Well, the secretary can choose to answer or not. If he's not answering, I'll accord another opportunity for him to answer. Kenneth Chan, concerning the Chinese name of Savannah, I understand that the oral reply last time has already opened a door for them. That is, Savannah can be translated in a way that gives us the impression that it will be a university. But my question is, there is a loophole there. This time, it can claim that it is a university. Next time, another institute can come forward to claim that it is a public university. So, students and parents should be confident in the development of such institutes. On the 14th of January, a letter was sent to the Bureau Director. It's almost Chinese New Year, and the letter was sent almost a month ago. Time's up, so I'm not really asking for an answer now. Please go back and ask those who are responsible to answer our question as soon as possible. If there's no further comment, thank you for attending. Our next meeting will be held on the 11th of March at 4:30 p.m. So, Happy New Year. Meeting adjourned.